After railing against Iran blocking the Strait of Hormuz for the past 6 weeks, now the United States is blockading the strait. That's after peace talks with Iran collapsed over the weekend. What it means is that US warships are now sitting off the Iranian coast on the lookout for ships leaving its ports and coastal areas. Commercial ships will be stopped and boarded. President Trump says military vessels will be eliminated. Christopher Preble is going to tell me what this means for the US, Iran and prices at the pumps. He's a senior fellow and director of the Reimagining US Grant Strategy program at the Stimson Centre in Washington, D.C. Christopher, great to see you. Can we start by trying to get a better understanding of how this blockade is actually going to work?
Right. So the U.S. Navy doesn't do blockades often. It is an act of war, after all. But the United States imposed famously a quarantine around the island of Cuba in 1962 during the Cuban Missile Crisis. This is a situation where U.S. Navy vessels come aboard, hail a ship approaching them, say, trying to determine where it came from, because again, this is targeted on ships departing from Iranian ports. They then board the vessel and inspect it and take control of it, seize it, if they determine that it is one of the ships that they are intending to blockade. So it's a time-consuming operation and potentially quite risky, because you're exposing the troops that are boarding these ships to, if one of those vessels has on board some kind of a military contingent or something like that, it could be quite dangerous. If it's a foreign flag vessel, that's another matter entirely. Is this a case where the United States is boarding a Chinese vessel, for example, or a Russian vessel that's leaving from Iran? Is the United States then effectively engaged in an act of war against China or Russia?
Yeah, gosh, there's so many questions. It does sound like a massive undertaking, as you underlined for us. I wonder, with that in mind, how long do we know can the US possibly sustain this type of operation?
Well, again, the U.S. Navy has a number of ships that are sort of well suited to this kind of thing, destroyers, littoral combat ships, and whatnot, but they're not unlimited. And of course, they can only cover so much water in a period of time. The Strait of Hormuz and the Persian Gulf itself is not a massive body of water, and yet, there are lots of ports and lots of places to monitor. So, as with any blockade, there will always be blockade runners, ships and captains that are wanting to try to evade detection and capture. And so it's a numbers game. You need lots of ships to impose that kind of a blockade, and those ships need to be prepared to use all force to stop the ships that are being apprehended or hailed.
Yeah, so that's a little of the how. Let's talk now about the why, if we could. First, I'll let the president himself explain this blockade in his own words. Let's have a listen.
We can't let a country blackmail or extort the world, because that's what they're doing. They're really blackmailing the world. We're not going to let that happen. And, the amazing thing is can you believe this? We don't use the strait. We don't need the strait. We have our own oil and gas, much more than we need. So we don't need it, but the world needs it.
Yeah, so he doesn't need it, the world needs it. He's saying he's doing it for the world. Do you buy that? Is that the outcome that's going to happen here? Is this going to be for the benefit of the world?
No, I don't believe so. And for one thing, the president doesn't seem to understand how oil market works. Oil prices are set on a global marketplace based on the amount of oil that's flowing in that marketplace. It's true, the United States produces a lot of its own oil. In fact, the largest energy oil producer in the world, frankly. But the fact remains, the price is subject to change, just like anywhere else where there's a supply disruption like we're experiencing today, one of the most severe supply disruptions in history. Then everyone's going to feel it, as we are here in the United States. Others elsewhere around the world are suffering not just the price increases, but also actual shortages and rationing and things like that, because this kind of a supply disruption is quite rare, but is large enough to actually be noticeable, as we've seen over the last 6 weeks.
Yeah, so if you buy that this is a negotiating tactic rather than a straight-up act of goodwill, is it going to be an effective negotiating tactic?
A goodwill, yeah. No, I mean, I am concerned that the president has tried a number of different things to ratchet up pressure on the Iranians. And I mean, frankly, this goes back to his first administration when he withdrew the United States from the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the JCPOA, that was negotiated under President Obama, that was in fact closely monitoring Iranian nuclear material and had been certified as such. But when the president pulled out of that deal and then was imposing, more and more pressure on the Iranian economy, they've been suffering in this way, arguably for decades. Again, with the exception of the JCPOA. So, the ability of the United States to impose pain on the Iranians has been demonstrated, but so far the Iranians have demonstrated a tolerance for enduring this kind of pain. And of course, when the president says things like we're demanding, as he once said, unconditional surrender, then when your back's against the wall, then any kind of capitulation could truly mean the end of the regime. And it's not so surprising to me that many Iranian leaders are not inclined to do that.
Yeah, and that's the obvious next point. Iran has surprised many to this point with its determination to resist the United States. Is there anything you can see or read or predict as to what's going to happen that might make you think that this is going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back somehow?
Candidly, from the Iranian side, I don't see it. There has always been some hope that the kinds of uprisings that occurred at the beginning of the year would be sufficient to weaken the regime and perhaps even topple it. But obviously that hasn't happened. Arguably, some of those who were most inclined to rise up against the government back at the beginning of the year have been killed or others intimidated by it. And simply lack the firepower to take back control. And so here again, you can see quite a bit of suffering and pain and just sort of misery on the part of the Iranian people, but not an inclination to take control of their country. And of course, if the United States has been destroying their infrastructure as they have, then they're taking control of a country that then is truly crippled and flat on its back. So again, I see a disparity of interest here between the Iranians and the United States, and the Iranians' interests are existential, truly their survival. For the United States, we're trying to impose certain increments of pain, but arguably not prepared to go to the same extremes, it seems to me, as the Iranians who are fighting for their survival.
Well, this goes on. Trump has boasted on Truth Social that most of Iran's navy has been sunk and has a warning for the vessels still afloat. He said, if any of these ships come anywhere close to our blockade, they will be immediately eliminated using the same system of kill that we use against the drug dealers on boats at sea. It is quick and it's brutal. Christopher, if it works, this will effectively cut off Iranian oil from the outside world. You talk about the pain, I guess, zeroing in on the financial ramifications. How damaging will the cut-off of that funding be for Iran?
Well, the speculation is that with the loss of hard currency, and frankly, it's more of a function of barter because the Iranians have been trading oil for goods for, again, a number of years. They've been subject to sanctions and other restrictions on their ability to sell oil. So the presumption, I guess, is that denying them access to the ability to barter that oil for the things they need, like food and medicine and things like that, that pain will reach a threshold that they haven't previously been subjected to. But here again, we've seen these sanctions been in place for a number of years, and increasingly so. And frankly, we've had other examples in world history, recent history, or over the last several decades, where countries have been subjected to very severe economic sanctions, and very rarely does it produce the kind of policy change that the sanctioning state or states intend. In fact, it's quite rare that they have that effect without some combination of negotiations that are conducted in good faith with the understanding of some kind of a negotiated deal at the end of it.
The UK and France are going to meet this week without the US to work on restoring traffic through the Strait of Hormuz. The United Nations has also come out in opposition to this blockade. Let's take a listen.
De-escalation is what is going to start helping us to address the crisis and to bring shipping back to the way that we used to operate. Additional restrictive measures do not really help us.
So, Christopher, was this all a play to force Europe to talk about what they are going to do to help open the strait, to get them on board as to trying to find a solution?
Well, I don't know. Of course, if the president is now talking, President Trump is now talking about blockading ships, then the United States is disrupting traffic just as much, if not more so, than the Iranians. And here again, you mentioned the president's social media post in terms of targeting ships. What if these ships aren't known to be Iranian? What if they are Kuwaiti? What if they are Emirati? There are other ships in the Gulf. Not like, in the targeting ships coming out of Venezuela. What happens then? And I think we've seen cases of that here in the Western Hemisphere, here in the Caribbean, where just blowing ships out of the water raises a lot more questions than it answers. And yet, again, there will always be some bold captain that's always willing to run the risk if the payoff is large enough. And I suspect that's likely to happen again. As for the other countries around the world, one of the great ironies is the United States always sort of held itself out as the country that was responsible for keeping critical sea lanes open. And the Strait of Hormuz is arguably one of the most critical sea lanes in the entire world. And here we are, the United States now, again, along with the Iranians, in a bid to selectively close off that strait to ships that it deems, enemy ships or violating U.S. policy aims.
We do get used to associating Trump with chaos and this administration with chaos to a certain degree. Just your final thoughts on just how bad, how chaotic this could be for all of the reasons you've outlined. What do you fear in the next days and weeks with all of these ships carrying different flags, trying to work through or potentially break through a US blockade?
What I fear more than anything else, candidly, is an exchange of fire, not just between the United States and the Iranians, that's already happened, but an exchange of fire between the United States ships, Navy ships, and other countries' ships. What then would happen? The risks of escalation are severe. The president so far has demonstrated a willingness, it seems, to escalate, but each time he has done so, he has not been satisfied. He has not achieved the policy aim that he has intended. And so the question is, will he just continue to double down and double down and double down, or will at some point he conclude that the pain that he himself is suffering and the political pain that he is suffering and the Republican Party here in the United States is suffering, will that threshold be reached at such time then he decides to de-escalate? But so far, he has continued to escalate, and he has claimed that he's willing to endure this kind of pain and suspects that the American people and the rest of the world will be able to endure this pain for many months.
Christopher, all eyes on the Strait of Hormuz, as we've said many times in the last 6 weeks. Great to get your insights. Senior Fellow and Director of the Reimagining US Grand Strategy Program at the Stimson Center in Washington, D.C. Thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
So we end with you. What do you think? Is this blockade going to work? Let us know in the comments below. Also, if you like this video, please hit that like button. And if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe. We'll see you next time.